For 88.7 FM WRHU, I'm Max Sack with the Alumnus of the Week. This week we are joined by Marc Ernay.
Hi.
Marc, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, I'm here on campus on Mondays. You caught me at a good time.
So Marc, first question, take us through what your time at RHU was like, what you did at the station, and then also what you've done in your professional career so far.
How much time do you have?
We got as much time as we need.
Goodness gracious. Well, let's see. I started on WRHU. I actually got dragged down here by a buddy of mine who was hosting, I think it might have been Airwave on Sunday nights. And this was back in the fall of 1986. I think it might have been right after the Mets won the World Series. Their last World Series win, which is really sad. Anyhow, so I had always wanted to... when I was a kid, I wanted to be Bob Murphy, who was then one of the voices of the Mets. He was the true radio guy. And so to me, he was summer. And I was a big baseball fan, big Mets fan, and I wanted to be Bob Murphy. And when I got into Hofstra, I actually was not a communications major. That took a couple of turns along the way, which we really don't have time for. But I came down here, came down to the studios, which were then in Memorial Hall under Bits and Bytes. Is it still called Bits and Bytes?
Yep.
Okay. Very strange. Anyhow, so I went down and I watched him do his show, and I fell in love with radio again that night. And I went the next morning, and I changed my major to communications with the radio broadcasting track. Started signing up for all the comm courses I could find. And back then, we didn't have to audition to be on WRHU. I mean, we kind of did, but it wasn't anything like it is now, where there's a class that you have to go through the whole thing. None of that. If you're willing to put in the time and learn how to run the board, the old board, going back to the mid-'80s now, then you're in, basically. So everybody started out doing a classical music show, the classics from Hofstra, and I wanted to be a sports guy, so I got in with the sports department, and right away we were doing in-game updates. Very quickly I started doing stuff. I don't know if I did football right off the bat, but I know in the spring it was basketball. And I was doing some updates from the studio, in-game, for the basketball games, men's basketball. I know we did women's basketball too, but I think my first update might have been during a men's game. Anyway, a little play-by-play, women's basketball, and eventually some men's basketball, and then some football. And my senior year, I was, if not the first, one of the first paid staffers here at WRHU. Thank you, Sue Zizza, who hired me as a co-host for Good Morning Hofstra, which was the new morning show with Jason Levy. He was sort of the host, and I was his news guy. So I would read news copy in the dark because I did not like fluorescent lights. I still don't like fluorescent light, but I would read news copy in the dark, usually with sunglasses on, so I could keep it as dark as possible. Anyhow, my final semester, spring semester, before graduation, I wanted to be a play-by-play guy, baseball play-by-play, but I couldn't do baseball here at Hofstra back then because we didn't have a line at the field, and the only way to physically do a baseball game would have been to run a telephone wire out of the physical fitness center, no Macarena back then, over the access road and over to the baseball field, which wasn't happening. So they said, you'll have to do something where we have a line, which would have been either the PFC or the stadium. The only sport at the stadium in the spring was lacrosse. I had never even seen a lacrosse game in person, but I signed up to do lacrosse play-by-play. Long story short, did a couple of games, fell in love with the sport. The guy who I recruited to be my color analyst wound up professionally as an analyst on Sports Channel and some other things along the way. Really great story. And he's still in touch, actually, with John Cooper, who was on the team and is now the head coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning in the NHL. So there's a roundabout way of saying I did a little bit of everything while I was here. Hosted a jazz show, a couple of other things. But really, the play-by-play was in my blood, and the sports was in my blood. And here I am, X amount of years later. It's too early in the morning to do math. that I am the sports director at 1010 Wins, morning update guy. And in fact, today I start back on U.S. Open tennis radio. So once my class is over today, I'll be heading over to the tennis center in Flushing Meadows to do some tennis play-by-play. But I've been doing that now. This will be my 16th year in the last 17. Also do some play-by-play for an independent baseball team up in Rockland County, the now New York Boulders of the Frontier League. First few years I was with the team, we were in the Can-Am League as the Rockland Boulders. I've done play-by-play here and there for, I'm now on St. Francis College men's basketball, men's volleyball, and branching out into a few other sports there. Teaching, not only here at Hofstra, the brand new sports radio reporting and production course, but also a sports broadcasting course at St. John's for most of the last 20 years. And I've been very lucky. I've been on 1010 Wins now for most of the last 25 years. Fingers crossed I get another 25 out of it. So there's the answer, Max, to question one. And we're about 6 minutes in. And you haven't said a word yet.
Honestly, Mark, I can say
cool.
You've caught me speechless just at your journey, all the stuff you did at Hofstra, professional career. Honestly caught me speechless from start to finish.
And I didn't even cover the middle of the journey, right? I gave you the beginning and where we are now, but I left out all the stuff in between.
I think it's a journey that I think people appreciate, just what you did, where you've gone. I mean, you've definitely left a good mark for RHU since you're one of our biggest alumni, so at least we could do here.
That's a scary thought. That's a scary thought. But it's nice of you to say that. Now I owe you $1. Thank you.
So now, Mark, I have to ask you, explain why you came to RHU. But why Hofstra as well? Why also come to Hofstra too? Because you said you did enter as a not communications major, and you came later to communications.
Yeah. Here's the story, and I won't take 6 minutes to tell it. Grew up in central New Jersey, so Rutgers right away was out of the picture, because to those of us who grew up near Rutgers, going to Rutgers back in that day was almost like settling for a community college. It was like a 4-year community college as opposed to a 2-year school. So I really didn't want to go to Rutgers. Back then, I was a computer science guy. And had I stayed with computer science, I'm convinced that I might have turned out to be Steve Jobs or Bill Gates or one of those folks. Instead, this was right after Revenge of the Nerds came out. And if you know anything about Revenge of the Nerds, the film, I was not that guy. So literally 2 days into my freshman year at Hofstra, I changed my major to psychology because I had a keen interest in psychology for reasons I will absolutely never get into. And again, it's a story that would take entirely too long. I proceeded my freshman year, first semester, to get a D, as in donut, in my intro to psychology course. My RA at the time was a psych grad student who very quickly was able to convince me that there's no chance I'll ever get into grad school with a D in intro to psychology. I would have to take the course over again. I just had no interest in doing that. So I was undeclared for a couple of years again until I discovered WRHU and became a radio major. What was the question again?
You just answered it. Why'd you come to Hofstra?
Oh, so I wound up at Hofstra. So here's the deal. Big football fan. I was going to go to the University of Miami. I was my whole life. My mom had gone there for a year. And we had family down. I'm going to the University of Miami. And my final year in high school, after taking years of French classes, I decided I need to take a Spanish class because if I'm going to be at the University of Miami, I'll obviously need to know at least some conversational Spanish.
Exactly.
So I went down for my admissions interview over the Christmas and New Year's holiday, 1983 into 1984. Just so happened the Dolphins were playing the Seahawks on, I believe it was the Saturday playoff game. So I got to go to the Orange Bowl for that. And then the Monday night was the Miami-Nebraska, the famous Orange Bowl game, 31-30. The morning after the game, I had my admissions interview. In between, game ends, and I wind up at a buddy of mine's dorm on campus we were up all night celebrating. I might have still been hungover or drunk when I showed up for my admissions meeting. And as they're pitching me on why I should come to Miami to Coral Gables, it occurs to me that there are way too many distractions here. And I'll never make it to the end of the first semester with the beach and everything else that was going on. I just, and again, the fact that I'm slightly impaired sitting there for my admissions interview, not a good idea. So I had known about Hofstra because of its proximity to Nassau Coliseum. This was at the tail end of the Islanders dynasty, and the Jets had used Hofstra as their training camp facility. So I knew about the school. So Miami was out. Penn State at the time was very hard to get to from central New Jersey. It was a long drive, and flying was not an option. So Penn State was out. Miami I couldn't go to because of the distractions. My third choice was Rutgers. They waitlisted me. So not only did I really not want to go there anyway, they insulted me by putting me on the wait list. But Hofstra said, comp sci major? We'd love to have you. And I said, you know what? Long Island, it's not far from home. Nassau Coliseum, Islanders, the Jets, close to Shea Stadium. I'm there. And that's how I wound up here at Hofstra.
That might be the most interesting story I've heard yet on how they pick Hofstra. You hear a lot of, I liked communications and I knew it was Hofstra. I think you might have given us, for the Alumni of the Week series, the most interesting interview on how you came to Hofstra. And then even your WRHU part, even another interesting part of it.
I have to go back real quick. So my first visit to this campus was Columbus Day of 1983. Came out with a friend of mine whose sister would eventually come here a couple of years after I started. And we arrived on campus. Told you, it's too early in the morning. We arrive on campus. We park the car over by the Unispan, the original Unispan, the student center. And the first thing I see is Hofstra Concerts presents Men Without Hats, which at the time was one of the hot bands, safety dance. So I'm like, oh, pretty cool. Men Without Hats coming. They give us a tour, and we wind up in Tower E. I don't know what it's called now. Might still be Tower E. Back then it was Enterprise.
Oh, still is.
And we wind up taking a tour of Tower E. We're in the elevator, probably 7 or 8 of us. We're going up to the highest accessible floor, allegedly. And we're supposed to be going to the 12th floor where our tour guide had been staying. The door opens, and painted on the wall outside of the 12th floor is a 4. Why is there a 4 signifying the 12th floor? I need to know the answer to this story. Well, I'm told it's an urban legend. We can't tell you unless you live here. So that was one of the draws to get me not only to come to Hofstra, but my first and only choice of dorm, and I wound up living there all 4 years, was Tower E. And I eventually was told the story. I can't retell it because it's not really suitable for family listening. But it's an interesting tale, and it made me even more glad that I wound up not only coming to Hofstra, but also dorming in Tower E.
Another story, I think, just to add to the legend of this one.
Which actually went 6 minutes. And
all right. I'll take it, though. We
but
like the content.
You added another question, too. So,
true. Yeah. So now, Mark, back to your professional career.
Yeah.
You've done a lot. You said it. You've done play-by-play pretty much everywhere. You're a sports director at 1010 Wins.
Yes.
You cover the U.S. Open with updates. I like the U.S. Open a lot, so when I saw that, and you heard that, saw on the LinkedIn, I was like, that's really cool, because I like the Open a lot. But I got to ask, how did RHU prepare you for your professional career? What skills, what ideas, how did they prepare you when it came time to make that jump out of college?
I did everything that I could while I was here. I was a DJ for all different formats, and when I got my first job, I was a news guy covering local government meetings. So I had done some news while I was here, reporting. In fact, I covered with the late, great Dave Mock. We covered Jesse Jackson's campaign appearance here in Hempstead, 1984 campaign trail. And that was one of the highlights of my news career. Still is. Between the music and the DJing and the news reporting and writing and the sports stuff that I did, I felt that I was as prepared as anyone could be to go out into the real world. And it turned out that I was right, because whatever was thrown at me, even from day one, I was ready to accept the challenge. And my first on-air gig not only was to cover local government meetings in central New Jersey, but they also made me a disc jockey on an oldies station. So I was able to handle that without any trouble as far as the physical logistics. We were playing phonographs back then and eventually segued, pardon the pun, into compact discs. And now, of course, everything is digital. You don't even have to worry about, touching anything outside of a screen or a mouse. And then my first job out of town was as the news and sports director and also morning show co-host, if you will, at a country music station.
Oh.
And this being the late 80s, it was on that cusp of the old country, the Dolly Parton, the Kenny Rogers, Hank Williams, into Garth Brooks, Clint Black, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, again, because I had dabbled in a variety of formats here, I was well prepared for life as a country music disc jockey, albeit for no more than about 9 or 10 months.
Still a fun little 9-10 months, I think, to add to your...
Oh, it was great. It was great.
So now, Mark, last question. I think the biggest question, it's always interesting to hear what the alumni say about this, is every year WRHU gets a lot of kids from around the world now. It's a worldwide station with people coming in to try and help out.
Let me just stop here. This station and this campus and this communications school, the Lawrence Herbert School of Communication, is probably 1 trillion light years from what I had when I was here. And I'm not complaining, because it prepared us for life in the real world, so to speak. And I know Bruce Avery hates that phrase. I'm sorry, Bruce. But it's true. It prepared me for whatever would happen once I left the friendly and the cozy confines of Hofstra. You all now who leave here are so much better prepared. You're almost, if you're not paid, then you're unpaid professionals, because you're all so well suited to walk into, back then I'm in a small market, right? That's you work your way up from the minor leagues to the majors. What comes out of this radio station now, if back then we'd be short season A-ball, to use a baseball metaphor, maybe full season A-ball, some of us might have been double A. What comes out of this radio station now, Max, at the worst, is double A. Most of the talent is triple A level, which is one step from the major leagues. And there are a lot of people who've come out of this program ready for the major leagues, which is very rare. But it's a testament to the phenomenal work that has been put in over the years by Bruce Avery, by John Mullen, by the late, great Ed Ingles, now Pete Silverman, and everybody else who's had a hand in WRHU for, I'm going back 34 years now. And, before Bruce was Jeff Krause. God bless him. He was the one, between Jeff and Sue, they set me on the path. And it was a path I didn't know that I would stay on for so long, but here we are, it's almost 35 years. And I'm still on this path, and I don't know how to do anything else. And I can't even conceive of an idea that I could do anything else other than be a broadcaster or, in some fashion, an instructor or a teacher of broadcasters.
I'm kind of speechless after that, Mark. I'm not going to lie, you caught me with that one. But, thank you for that. I think just thank you is the word we can say here.
All I can say is thank you guys, because you have enhanced the reputation of WRHU to levels that I don't think any of us, if we had looked into a crystal ball 30 years ago, I don't think anybody would have foreseen that WRHU would have the reputation, would have the Marconi Awards and all the other accolades that it's gotten over these decades. And again, this radio station goes back even long before I was here. It was, I think I was here for the 30th or 35th anniversary. I believe it was 30th year. We were into our 4th decade, and now here we are. We just celebrated the 75th anniversary last year, right? And now here we are into, well into decade number 8. And the reputation of this establishment, and again, it's not just WRHU, it's the reputation of the School of Communication, it's the reputation of Hofstra, has just mushroomed to strati. I'm being perfectly honest, I never would have imagined that any of this would have happened while I was here. And watching it from even a little bit afar, admiringly, I'm so jealous of everything you guys have now at your disposal that we didn't have. And, the fact that I'm able to come back here now and give back in an academic role, somewhere I know Jeff Krause is cackling. Because, again, where I never would have seen how things had improved here and gotten to the level that they are, I don't think Jeff Krause ever would have imagined that I'd wind up as a professor of communications here or anywhere, frankly.
Well, Mark, we can just say thank you for coming back and helping out here. And you work with a lot of students all day, so I think now the big final question is, what's the best piece of advice you have for new people joining RHU so they continue to keep making the station grow bigger and bigger like it keeps going and even branch out and have great careers themselves?
Max, I don't think anything has changed as far as effort goes. If you're into it, do as much as you can. A lot of it has to do with time management, too. I was very poor at time management. Still am. I keep joking. I've been joking now for 35 years that eventually I'm going to write a book on procrastination. You get it?
I get
putting
it.
I'm
in the same book.
Procrastination? Okay. Sometimes people laugh at that one because maybe it's funny. Do as much as you can. Be as prepared for a job outside of school when you graduate. And if broadcasting is what you want your future to be, it can be. Because there are so many more opportunities now than when I left here a little over 30 years ago. You've got the digital scape, you've got podcasts, you've got the video angle. Multimedia has blossomed over just the last 10 years into levels that, again, I don't think anybody could have foreseen. And radio is still here, right? We're celebrating year number 100. In fact, the 100th anniversary comes up election night. I think will be the anniversary of the first national broadcast was election returns for the 1920 presidential balloting. And so here we are 100 years later, and so many people have predicted the death of radio over the years, but it's stronger than ever. It's got more platforms than ever with satellite and internet extensions and apps, right? WRHU has its own very fantastic app and website. And the Hawk, the web channel for the Hofstra Athletics, is phenomenal. Again, it provides everybody with so much more opportunity. Here I was telling you roughly 20 minutes ago that we could only do, if we wanted to do play-by-play, we could only do basketball, football, and eventually lacrosse. You tell me, what sports don't you do play-by-play for now?
I think golf and tennis.
Right. Right. And you probably could do tennis.
Probably.
Golf would be harder because it's off-site, but again, you could, theoretically, you could broadcast golf. Just be harder. But the litany, the list of sports that can be broadcast now, I mean, it's again, your list now of what you don't do is the same size as the list of what we did do back then, which is incredible. Thank you, technology. And it helps that there's interest. Because if there were no interest in broadcasting field hockey or soccer or some of the other sports, they wouldn't be done. But people are coming here from not only around the New York City area, but across the country and around the world to learn how to become professional broadcasters. And, you know, we're only scratching the surface when we talk about sports.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, that's all the time we have. Once again, everyone, Marc Ernay, alumnus of Hofstra University and WRHU. Mark, thank you very much for joining us again.
You know, ordinarily for me, it's you give me 22 minutes, I'll give you the world, and I think we went a little bit over. But that's better for you guys.
It is.
Maybe.
It is.
All right.
Mark, thanks again.
Thanks, Max. Appreciate it.